Good morning and welcome to the BOCC's Monday morning meeting. Looks like we've got roads this morning first.
Good morning, Susie, Finance Manager. So we'll just start it off with the road fund. We've budgeted 15.7 million for taxes. The largest part of that is going to be property taxes, which are due the first half in April and the second half in October. So we anticipate seeing a large increase in that revenue stream as October approaches. Currently, they've brought in 8.8 million. Intergovernmental revenues, they've budgeted 20.3 million and they've brought in about 2 million. So included in this line item is the motor vehicle fuel tax. So we learned that the state is having system issues, so they've been depositing roughly half of our motor vehicle fuel tax revenue. So we should see a large increase in that revenue stream once those issues have been corrected. Do you want to add anything?
Sure, yeah. So the motor vehicle fuel tax and other distributions that follow that formula base, the state's been having some issues. Originally it's gonna get fixed in April, then it was gonna get fixed in May, then it was gonna get fixed in June. So we're hoping for a July fix on that. They've been open on their communication on that side monthly. So as we hear more, we'll be able to communicate that with the board.
Is that tax is it the only source of revenue in that fund?
No. In intergovernmental, the main item that's gonna be the majority of this is our grant revenues. So as we do projects like on the agenda tomorrow is Cloverdale, the amount of that's grant related, once we expend it, we'll ask for reimbursement on that. And that's gonna be the largest chunk, almost probably I'd say 90% of that.
What's the unreserved $17 million? Where's that? The beginning unreserved 17.3 million?
That's pretty much our beginning fund balance.
How? I guess, why is that so large?
Sure. So as we, plan for projects, most of our larger capital projects are going to require some sort of match. Luckily, over the last few years, we have had ARPA dollars to help match those. And so that has grown. Susan's project plan over the next few years does plan to expend all those funds. But as we know, as we looked at projects even from this year, we have run into issues with those projects. A great example would be Cloverdale. We planned to start that earlier. We had some issues to take care of, and we're finally here to award it this week, hopefully. Execute it this week. Every year, Susan does present a 6-year plan. I'm sure she can talk on that if she likes. But a plan's as good as a plan can get. Day 2, something happens and they work through it. My understanding is, once again, her plan does spend all those funds down to a nice balance at the end of the year, which is that $7 to $9 billion mark.
So they're allocated for certain projects. It just says unreserved.
Correct.
Okay.
So goods and services had a budget of 350,000. So far, they've brought in 204,000. Miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 530,000 and has brought in 263,000. So both of those are on target so far for the year.
What makes up goods and services and miscellaneous in a road fund?
So goods and services are gonna be when we do ancillary work for other departments, other cities,
Oh, okay.
maybe a diking district, things of that nature.
Miscellaneous, I'm assuming, would include like your investment earnings.
That's gonna be the majority of that.
So the money that we have in our beginning balance, though that's earmarked for projects, is that invested or is it just sitting in a bank? It is being invested.
It's, yeah, we adjust our investments on a weekly basis.
Okay, good.
So other financing sources has a budget of 4.5 million and we've brought in $3,200. So we've budgeted for transfers in related to ARPA dollars.
And on that note, I think that the budget's the full ARPA dollar value. The two remaining projects, I believe, the two big ones are gonna be Cloverdale, which is on the agenda. And then the second one's gonna be the Tower Road Bridge, and so we're a little, I think 2026 on that one.
So the beginning balance number has funds that are earmarked for projects that do not include ARPA money then?
Correct.
Okay.
Um,
Those two funds combined are the projects that we have in the works. Money's been earmarked. It just hasn't been spent yet.
Yeah, and then, of course, at the end of the year, our comfortable area is the $7 to $9 million mark,
Mhm.
because it's more than that 2-month period, because our main funding source is property taxes, and we don't see those till, April usually.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So personnel has a budget of 9.4 million, and so far they've expended 3.1 million. So they are slightly below target, but they do have 2 openings currently, which could attribute to why we're not seeing them at target for that expense line. Supplies has a budget of 3.5 million, and they've expended about 1 million. It's our understanding that projects in this fund typically ramp up near the fall. So we could start seeing an increase in that line item as the year goes on. Services has a budget of 9.3 million, and so far has spent 2.3 million. So they are under budget. But again, that's due to projects typically taking place summer, fall. So that line item will start seeing an increase as well.
Yeah, if I could just jump in on that part. So going to the supplies line, the big item on that one that we'll see here, that's actually ongoing currently, is our chip seal project. Because we do that ourselves, we are buying the rock material and the oil material. We expect that to be around 1.5 to 1.8 million. And then the services lines, our two main items in there are going to be ER&R, which is billed on a quarterly basis. So we are only 1/4 of foreign for the year. And the other large one is going to be our overlay program. So that was Lakeside, and I think we'll see that in around $2.93 million this year.
So debt service currently doesn't have a budget, but they do have amounts booked in the financials. So this is related to SPIDAs or subscription technology arrangements. So the county is required to report liabilities related to that. So this negative amount is the reversal from last year's entry. And then at the end of this year, they'll book another entry related to that.
So that number's always gonna be different year to year, depending on,
Yes, it's
yeah.
call
But
it
there's-
an accounting entry only.
But it never gets a budgeted number.
It's just a booking at the end of the year to comply with requirements.
Okay.
Capital has a budget of 27.7 million, and so far has spent 440,000. But we're anticipating projects taking place later this year that will utilize those remaining funds. So that's it for the expenses. Did you-
Yeah, and just to address the capital, it's a stark difference there. Just going back to how we've been approving the projects throughout this year, and so we'd expect to spend on those. I do believe we'll come back on a Wednesday in middle of July to really narrow in on there and give better updates on what the status of certain ones are. And then that way the board can have a better understanding there.
Yeah, that was my question, actually, Sean. Given that we know what our current expenditure is, we know what projects we have and what that fund balance is, do we know if there's gonna be any money left over? Are we gonna be over budget? That was my next question was,
Yeah, my gut on that's gonna be, we're not gonna hit that mark. Because we already know of a couple projects that were originally slated for this year that have been pushed or have been delayed. I'm gonna come back to Cloverdale, on the 6-year plan, we originally anticipated that starting in April. It's almost July. The Dyke Road is another good one. We're still working on that 408 permit. I'm not sure the status on that. And then the Tower Road Bridge, of course. And so that'll need to be adjusted and massaged there. And then we'll need to look at our FEMA projects as well, especially our small ones. Small FEMA projects, anything under $1 million, they give us the money up front. And so we'll need to be able to recognize that is in that beginning fund balance. And so we can account for that as well.
So FEMA fronts the funds up, they give it to us up front.
On small projects, so anything under $1 million. It used to be a lot lower than that. It used to be like 250, 300 over the years, and they made a big jump in the past, and it's good and bad.
Yeah.
That's it for roads.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Susie, Finance Manager again. So typically finance comes and presents like a county-wide financial presentation, but it has been some time since we've presented the funds that we oversee. So this is going to be a different presentation than what we have recently shown. So the general fund for our department, we have goods and services, which has a budget of 240,000.
There we go.
Okay, there you go.
So we've brought in 243,000, so we have exceeded budget slightly there. So the bulk of that item is actually through department billings. So we do have a cost allocation plan that allocates a portion of our wages, and that's billed to building and planning as well as public works. So those billings are done once a year, typically in January. Miscellaneous is most likely going to be our investment earnings. Next slide, please.
Hold on, can you go back
Oh.
for a second? So the $240,000 that are the goods and services billed to interagencies, right, within the county, we're already at 243. We bill those at the beginning of the year, correct? So they pay them all at once. So there's not going to be any more coming out of their budget for that service.
Correct.
Okay.
And Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. We typically look at all of our revenues for the third quarter budget amendment, and we try to true up everything. And so we'll true this one up in that budget amendment.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know it's only $3,100, but I'm wondering if we knew what that billing was and they already paid it, why we're over.
Yep.
So the fact that it's already over budget right now is not a concern?
No, it's revenue. Yay.
Okay,
Well, revenue yay for
Yeah,
us, but
yeah.
Public Works is going,
Yeah.
wait a second, that's why I was asking, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
Personnel, they have a budget of 438,000 and we've expended 176,000. So we are right on target with that. We don't have any openings in our department, so we would expect to see us meeting budget for that. Supplies has a budget of $7,600 and we've spent 418 so far. Services has a budget of 184,000 and so far we've spent 76,000. So we are on target for each of those.
So on supplies, how did we arrive at 7,650? Was that like last year's number? Because if we're only at 418 right now, we're not planning on spending $7,200 by the end of the year on supplies, right? So how did,
Yeah, we typically have been under budget on that,
Okay.
even in the past year. So that's office supplies, things like that. And we have heavier, for example, we have heavier printing, things like that as we start the budget cycle. So that'll be September, October. But we won't spend all of that budget.
Next slide,
With
please.
the move to paperless, all of this printing we're doing is going to go away someday, we're thinking.
I'm hoping, yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything that we're statutorily required to print, or are there things that we're just choosing to print because it's
I
convenient?
think we're just choosing to print some of them.
So the next one is still the general fund, but it's gonna be non-departmental. So, we have licenses and permits that are budgeted at 203,000. So far, we've brought in 176,000. The largest portion of this revenue is actually Comcast franchise fees. So they pay this quarterly to the county. Intergovernmental revenue has a budget of 35,000, and we haven't brought anything in so far. Typically intergovernmental revenue would be like grant revenue or anything like that. Miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 8 million and so far has brought in 3.7 million. Most of that is going to be the quarterly rent payment received from the landfill. So we've received 2 of those payments so far.
Can we go back to the
Mhm.
licenses and permits real quick? So you said that's Comcast franchise fee. Is that the only thing that's in that, or are there other franchise fees that we're collecting also?
That's the only thing that's in that line.
So we're not collecting franchise fees from anybody else on our right of ways?
Not currently. Mhm. And the
Why do we
franchise,
collect them from Comcast and nobody
Yeah,
else?
That's what I'm wondering.
well, the franchise fees are related to services for cable only. Yeah. You can,
So
so other ones, there is no payment required under franchise fees. Only if they're providing cable service.
So is this different than the franchise fees that we were talking about with the right of ways for the PUD and other companies?
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. So annual franchise fees, the only ones we can collect from is telecoms. And they have to be directed towards specific activities such as 2KLTV, televising these meetings and things like that. The other franchise fees that we collect is when they're renewing the franchise. The fees we collect are the advertisement, our attorney's time, and those are what we can collect. There is a more recent court case that Doug has discussed with us that King County brought against a special purpose district where they were awarded particular franchise fees. But the way we are set up currently, we only can collect from telecoms. And up until that court case, you could not collect from anybody else besides the time it takes for you to set up the franchise or renew the franchise and the cost to advertise. So those are the only fees that we collect for them. We don't collect a rent from them for using an easement that we obtained. That's not the way the state law is written.
So that's purely the legislation that was done.
Yes, the telecom is something that is written up that way.
Okay.
I'm not sure why, but that is just the way it is. And if you guys want to have a bigger discussion on franchises someday and what we do and who we do and don't have current franchise with, who we're in the works with, and what we charge them, we can certainly bring that on a Wednesday afternoon.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
That surprises me. I can't.
Based on previous conversations, it surprises me also. Okay,
So other financing sources are going to be budgeted transfers in. So we had 550,000 that was transferred in from risk. And then another 221,000 that comes from the capital improvements fund. And that payment is used to pay the debt on the morgue.
what is it that we transfer in from risk?
Last year, Risk had to pay all of their premiums for 18 months. And because they were changing their fiscal year at the risk pool. So they borrowed, basically, they had to be supplemented $50,000 at the end of the year. And then we turned around and paid it back this January.
We won't have to do that this year though, right?
No, we
already
will not
budgeted
have
for
to do that.
Okay. And Kathy, they've already told us that they're increasing that premium again next year?
Yeah, they've already told us that. I anticipate in their July meeting, they'll probably also discuss, financials again and give us an update on things.
Yeah, I'll be going to that. Are you going to that?
I may, at this point, I'm kind of holding off, so.
So personnel, this department doesn't have any people associated with it, but we do have a budget of 264,000 and so far I've spent 55,000. So the general fund is paying for unemployment claims for general fund employees that are filing for unemployment. So that's what those costs are associated
Throughout
with.
any departments, not just, right?
So
We bill, there's several departments we bill for their unemployment. But then for the general fund, for departments like, my department, things like that, we pay all of it out of the
Out of that.
non-departmental.
So supplies, had a budget of 1,600. We've expended all of that. We'll be keeping an eye on that to see if we need to do a budget amendment later on, if they spend more than that. Services had a budget of 3.8 million, and so far we've spent 2.3 million. So we are exceeding our target currently on that. But part of that's due to quarterly billings from law enforcement records as well as emergency management. So the general fund is paying a portion for their costs related to those services. So that's why we're currently exceeding target a little bit for that one. So we still anticipate to get 2 more billings for this year.
And we also pay in the non-departmental, we pay, industrial acts, we pay some of our internal service department billings for the general fund for some of our departments. So that was already done in January, so.
So when you say that the general fund, if we go back to services, the general fund, we're not subsidizing any of those other departments. They're already pulling from the general fund. It's just that as a whole, they've pulled more than what we anticipated, correct? It's not like we're giving one department more money that wasn't allocated to them over another.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Debt service has a budget of 2.6 million, and so far we've spent just shy of 500,000. So that includes the morgue payments related to that transfer that comes from Capital Improvements Fund. So we did make that payment in June. And then the second payment for that will happen in the fourth quarter of this year.
As well as the landfill mortgage, the landfill
Rent payment.
debt.
Can we go back to the services? Do we have a report that shows line item by line item, which departments are receiving what out of that general
Yes.
fund? We do?
Yes, yeah. So when we just got finished doing the 2026 and 2027 budgeted for industrial accident, for example. And so there's a number of departments. We just, instead of billing those departments, we bill this non-departmental fund.
Got it.
And I have all the details of what those departments are.
How do you allocate the services costs? You're at 100% now. How do those get allocated to this group?
So for example, I was working on industrial accident, which is an internal service billing, and it's based upon hours labor hours, and that's how that's billed out.
Okay.
So is there a formula for each department? How do we?
Yes.
Okay.
Each cost allocation has its own methodology. So industrial accident, for example, is the hours, and then it's the hours specifically by risk category. So for example, your sheriff's department has a higher risk category than finance department, for example.
Got it.
And then in IT has a billing, and theirs is based upon a ratio of devices and personnel. And then risk management's another large internal billing, and that's just based upon labor hours.
And historically, has that been pretty accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent.
Yeah.
So capital, we do have a budget of 125,000, and that's for vehicle replacement in the event of a loss to a vehicle. I don't,
Yeah. On our vehicles, we have property damage through the risk pool, but we do not have an actual comprehensive collision coverage for any of our vehicles. And so this is just a placeholder for an emergency situation of if we had to replace a vehicle.
Is there a reason we don't have that? The comp and the collision?
Well, risk pool doesn't provide it.
We don't.
And so we're basically self-insured. Yep.
so
We don't have very many county vehicles on the road, do we? I mean, outside of this, because this covers, what cars does this cover?
It covers any general fund vehicles, which all of the sheriff's
All- I
vehicles
thought this
are
was
general fund.
Fleet. So this covers, oh, wow.
Road
Yeah.
department,
It's,
Road department?
the road
all those
department, are
vehicles?
they included?
no,
Okay, so they have their own.
yeah, this would be just to cover any general fund vehicles.
Well, that's what I guess the question is.
And the
what
largest one
vehicles
is the sheriff's department. Coroner has vehicles, sheriff's department. Some of our other departments have vehicles in general
So-
fund.
Is it just me or does 125 grand seem a little light for all those cars?
It is light. But Sean,
How
Sean might be
often-
able to tell us how many, what are historically,
How often do we
Yeah.
exceed our budget for that item?
Good morning, Sean Rowe again, Public Works. Historically, and this has been used for collision repair, usually related to the sheriff's office on a pit or something of that nature. Most of our smaller departments in the general fund have never used this in the past. Say, some of them that come to mind might be the assessor's office or some of the courts have vehicles and things of that. But the prominent use on this one is the sheriff's office.
And have we depleted that fund in the past?
We have.
And where do we make it up for? Where does the subsidy come from?
Any of those would be eaten by the reserves on the vehicles themselves and then allocated over the allocation. So for example, a new sheriff's vehicle, if we were to total one, that's between $95,000 and $100,000, but there is a time lag to acquire those. Repairing some of those vehicles, depending on the type, we're seeing this currently on the Tahoes. There is some structural damage that's, $15,000 to repair, things of those natures. And so annually we do deplete this fund. It's just part of the nature of the game.
and so the good news is we haven't touched it yet this year.
Motor
But we
pool bill-
probably will.
Motor pool billings are coming out in July.
Hey,
We don't bill at the front of the year, we bill in the middle.
Yeah.
That seems like an awful light number considering the value of a sheriff's vehicle.
We haven't totaled one in a couple of years now, so we'll keep knocking on wood.
Well, let's hope I never see.
You said it, now we're going to have
I
it.
never should have said that.
I just find a gnome in the garden.
Is there a reason that we do that? I mean, it just ostensibly to me, it looks like, I mean, if we paid 125,000 in premium to cover these cars, have we looked at that, evaluated whether or not it makes sense financially to do that? So that when the day comes that does happen, we're not,
Kathy, I don't know if sheriff cars can be covered.
Yeah, they can't be covered under risk pool. I know that. Because I'd already looked at that and asked. But I don't know. We are high risk
Yeah.
because the majority of the general fund vehicles are the sheriff's vehicles. They have what, 50 plus?
I think it's 47 active and 5 spares, plus their, trailers and
Yeah.
boats and things of that nature.
Wow, okay.
yeah, I think we might want to
Yeah,
have a further
we can maybe-
discussion about that.
We can maybe talk to our broker about,
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, I can only imagine that sheriff's vehicles would be high risk.
So transfers has a budget of 3 million and so far we've expended 1.5 million. So these occur periodically throughout the year based on cash flow. They are done to support like Expo Center, Victims Witness, budget stabilization, capital improvements, and some other funds. So we'll evaluate the fund balance or the cash balance for this department and make those transfers throughout the year.
and typically, for example, elections, they wait until later in the year, once they've accumulated some of their cost information to ask us for a transfer to help cover county portion of elections.
Rural public facilities, so we've budgeted 2.8 million in taxes for this fund. We've received 663,000. So that, the majority of that is gonna be the sales tax that we pass on to the grant recipients that you had awarded earlier this year. So when we award those funds, again, it's evaluating cash flow and just making sure that we have sufficient reserves before remitting those payments out. Miscellaneous is gonna be our investment earnings. We have a budget of 47,000 and we've brought in 30,000 so far this year.
So I do have a question, because you triggered a thought. When we did approve those grants earlier in the year, do we have a system that doesn't allow for us to approve more funding than what we have? Does that make, you understand what I'm saying? Because they brought forth like 6 or 7 of them. And off the cuff, how do we know, do you guys make sure that we're not presenting anything that is above and beyond
Right.
our fund? Okay.
Right. We did a projected cash flow before we ever recommended approval of those so that we had sufficient cash flow. You can see we have a reserve of about 1.5 million. And so that plus what we anticipate earning, we can't exceed that.
Okay. So if there's a request for more than what we have, do we just amend the request?
Yeah, you would have the ability to prioritize and maybe deny a request. You
Okay.
don't have to approve everything.
Thank you for the education, by the way, on all this stuff. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
So this fund doesn't have any personnel. Services has a budget of 2.8 million. Those are gonna be the payments that get passed through to the grant recipients. So far, we've issued payments to 4 of the 8 recipients, and the other 4 will receive them between now and the end of the year. We do have $1,000 budgeted for debt service. So far, we haven't expended any of that.
On those grants, Kathy, this is probably a question for you. Do we know, have we funded the fire training one in Kalama yet? Has that one been funded?
Yes,
It has, okay.
yeah, yes. We just released, I think, last week, some payments.
Yeah, I got a phone call from the paper asking me questions about that, so I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page with it.
We have one for City of Longview, and that one, because they didn't have any matching funds, that one we're asking for them to submit a reimbursement basis. All the other ones had matching funds, and so those were full-out grants that we just dispersed all together. Part of the requirement in their contracts is also to, at the end of the project, to submit a certification of completion of that project. So that's another thing that we have in place as well.
Our next fund is going to be the Federal Forest Title III Fund. So this, we do have a budget of 11,000 for intergovernmental revenue. It is a federal grant that we were previously receiving. We were notified that this funding had expired and it hasn't been renewed. So we're not anticipating receiving this funding this year. This was the funding that we provided to fire districts for providing services outside of their general service area.
Does that typically go to the ones that are out in the county?
Yeah, it typically goes to the fire districts. I think it's 2 and 6. So it's for search and rescue operations primarily. It could be, in the past, it could be used for equipment, training, search and rescue, things like that. But this budget's going to be amended because we're not going
It
to
is.
receive any more of this funding. And I think Rick had asked me to look into, was there another source available to the fire districts to help this year with some of their search and rescue expenses? So I'm searching, looking for some funds to maybe be able to award some type of grant.
So we had budgeted 11,000 for services that we'll be amending since the funding's no longer available. Our next slide is the Stadium Convention Center. So we have 100,000 budgeted for taxes. That's going to be our hotel motel tax that we receive from the state. We did look at the historical data, and we did see that during the summer months, we do see a large increase in that revenue line. So we do anticipate being closer to target by the end of the summer. This tax revenue, there is a 2-month lag. So your receipts that you receive in March are actually for payments made in January. Next slide, please. So for expenses, the only expense that we have budgeted is a $60,000 transfer that goes to the Tourist Facility Fund, and they provide grants to local businesses, other municipalities for providing like tourist events. So an example would be like the big smoke that just happened, in Kalama, the 4th of July event that they have coming up. Those are the types of grants that they provide.
So this doesn't cover like the tourist stuff for the bridge is washed out, the Mount St. Helens. It's not part of this.
No,
Okay.
So chemical dependency, mental health. So we took this fund over at the beginning of the year. So we did receive some tax funding that we weren't originally budgeting for. So these are taxes from annual filers. Miscellaneous revenue had a budget of 150,000. So far, we've brought in 61, and that's gonna be all investment earnings. So since that tax has gone away, we're not expecting to see any revenue outside of investment earnings going forward. For expenses, we do have just shy of 11,000 budgeted for personnel. So far, we've spent 912,000. We do not anticipate spending any more. So that 912 was from the health department who used to manage this fund. They would charge this fund for a portion of their personnel that spent time working on this fund. But since our wages are billed out through a cost allocation, we're not gonna be charging this fund specifically. Services has a budget, of 8,900. We anticipate not utilizing these expenses, so we'll be amending that budget as well. Transfers has a budget of 2.9 million. So far, we've spent about 870,000. So these transfers are to other county departments like jail, sheriff, that utilize the mental health tax funds. So they bill our department, some are monthly, some are done quarterly, and then they supply us with hours worked for the employees that are paid with the mental health tax. So far, we've received every invoice through April from all 8 departments.
And this is the fund we anticipate having about 2.5 million at the end of the year that can go into 2026. But as you can see, based upon what our budget is, expense budget, that's not sufficient to cover the whole 2026. So that will be a work session that we'll discuss and explore what the board would like to do.
So our next fund is going to be affordable housing. We have goods and services with $124,000 budget. So far, they've spent about 50,000. So this is a portion of recording fees that are specific to affordable housing. Miscellaneous would be investment earnings again.
The money that's spent on this, uh, it's specific to affordable housing, but what is that? I mean, like, what can we spend it on?
Well, what happens is the money comes, I can tell you, the money comes in from the recording fees here. And then for expenses, we turn around and once a year, we return funds to the cities. That's what that $49,000 is. And then the transfers is transferring out to the Human Services Department, which is managed under Carol and Gina. And so everything that happens on the expenditures related to this all happen in the Human Services Department.
And we give the money back to the municipalities
Mhm.
and they do with it what they.
Right, once a year. And that's done about, I think, February.
Next slide, please. So we have law and justice funding. They have a budget of 1.7 million for taxes. So far, we've brought in 366,000. So this is criminal justice sales tax. So again, that's gonna have that 2-month lag. So anything through May would actually be for receipts from January through March.
And that's 100% sales tax?
Yes. Mhm.
Miscellaneous revenue had a budget of 50,000 and so far has brought in 31,000 and would be related to investment earnings.
This fund, just so you know, we have a beginning balance of about 2.5 million. And we've discussed with Savannah in looking at the Hall of Justice expenditures for the electrical and HVAC, transferring 2 million of that over to help cover that project. Because it qualifies, because it's for criminal justice, and that's where the sheriff's office location is and everything, and the courts.
How soon are you gonna know if it qualifies?
Huh?
How soon will you know if it qualifies?
I've already looked at it. It qualifies.
It does? Okay.
Mhm. The RCW actually has a line in there that says it can be spent on facilities.
Okay.
So personnel has a budget of 1.4 million. So far, we've spent just shy of 600,000. At the bottom, it shows that we have 4.5 FTE. So the report that we use to generate the FTE, it's done by fund and not department. And so, or sorry, I got that backwards. So it pulls based on department and not fund. So we're not able to 100% show any like split allocations. So currently there is 11.5 FTE being paid out of this fund and not 4.5 as it shows. That is something we are working on with that report. Supplies has a budget of 15,000 and so far has spent 2,800. Services has a budget of 316,000 and has spent approximately 180,000. 107,000 of that are the internal service billings related to IT that are paid in January once a year. Capital, we do have a budget of 40,000 and so far have spent 29,000. So in 2024, the sheriff's department purchased a vehicle. Those vehicles require outfitting. That wasn't budgeted for and paid for until this year. So that is what those expenses are related to. Budget stabilization does have some investment earnings that we weren't originally budgeting for. And then other financing sources has a budget of 560,000. And that's our estimated transfer from the general fund that's done at the end of the year.
This is the fund where we're putting aside 1% of revenues from the prior year to build up a emergency fund. And it's considered part of our general, even though it has its own fund number, it's still considered part of the general fund reserve.
I like that idea.
So we don't have any expenses budgeted for this fund. Any expenses that were going to be paid for out of this fund would have to be approved by the commissioners.
And that's the one that it would have to be a unanimous approval of any expenditure, all
That's
three
because it's
commissioners.
nothing's earmarked for it. It's just there.
No, yeah, it's just there for catastrophic or unforeseen emergencies, basically.
Cumulative reserve, the only thing that we're budgeting for revenue would be investment earnings. This fund is not currently being utilized, so we are going to be recommending that we close this fund in the next budget amendment.
In the past, this fund and this goes back to something that happened historically, half of the tourism sales tax dollars that came in, half would go to tourism and half would go to this cumulative reserve. And what was happening is this account was set up to take care of some major construction issues on the is it Hofstede?
Hofstede.
When we owned that facilities, there were a lot of deferred maintenance related to it. And so they were accumulating funds here out of the tourism dollars to help pay for those expenditures. It's no longer part of our properties. And so we have now, for the 2025 budget, all of the sales tax revenue for tourism is going into tourism and not into this account any longer. But we have this fund balance. And so we're going to, when we recommend to close this account, we'll transfer that fund balance remaining over to tourism.
So this is a fund balance, and that's been carried forward. It's not 675,000 in interest earned.
No,
Okay,
yeah,
because I was gonna say, where do we have money sitting around earning that
yeah,
amount of money? Okay,
yeah. So that 675 is earning right now, but when we close this fund, we're going to transfer it to tourism.
As you can see, no expenses have been budgeted for this fund. Next slide, please. So next up is the cafe. So we do have goods and services budgeted of 300,000, and so far we've brought in 6,000. So those are going to be the food and drink sales over at the Hall of Justice Cafe. We didn't open until April, and then the first 2 weeks of April were spring break, so it was a little slow for us in the beginning. Other financing sources, this is going to be made up of transfers from the general fund. So 10,000 of that was their initial startup, and then we did have to provide another 7,000 to help cover some costs. Supplies, we have budgeted 221,000 and so far have spent 9,100. So this is going to include personnel costs related to the temporary employee that we have working the cafe, as well as our equipment rental that hits this line as well. Services, we have 80,000 budgeted and so far have spent 9,600. And then debt service has a budget of 9,000 and hasn't spent anything so far. That 9,000 is for repayment of the startup that the general fund provided. So we anticipate that once the cafe starts having some profit, that they'll start making those payments back to the general fund.
is that 221,000 you said for rental of equipment, but does it include purchase of equipment at all in there?
We're probably going to purchase some of the equipment. We start off with rentals and now we've been evaluating that and we think we can purchase some of the equipment and we're going to need to adjust this budget downward. And it was also anticipating that we'd be open the full year and we were, yeah, we haven't
Yeah.
been.
So if you break that down, how much of that is personnel cost versus equipment rental?
The majority is going to be personnel. So our equipment rental is a max of like 600 a month. And so we've been open 3 months now. So 2,000 of that's roughly attributed to the equipment rental.
Okay,
So the 221 is just kind of throwing us off there,
Yeah,
looking at that compared to what the actuals are, but
yeah, we need
It'll
to
be a-
adjust it.
yeah, okay.
Now that we've been up and operating, we can make a more reasonable
Guesstimate.
evaluation of that. So, and we also had committed that after maybe 6 months this pilot is supposed to be a pilot program, that we would come back to the board with a full discussion and a workshop and discuss the cafe and what the benefits and how the financials look. But we're still tweaking things like hours, food, product purchases, and then basically, like we said, we looked at the rentals, and the rentals are not, we'd rather buy some of the equipment and have it because it was reasonably priced versus renting.
Well, if when that conversation takes place, if it's something that we decide to continue to do, then yeah, I would say we need to look at purchasing them. In a situation like that with a cafe though, when you look at the fixed cost on things that we have and the cost that we would adjust, I would say our food cost is one that we could probably improve.
Yeah, and we have already done that.
Yeah.
It's a matter of trying to determine what sells, what doesn't sell, and everything. So we've had a powwow already about that. So and made some adjustments.
Do you know what the overall sentiment is with having the cafe there with the employees over there?
I don't know. Kelly may ask Kelly to speak to that.
Yeah, after talking with Superior Court and District Court, they really like having it over there. The employees are asking for it, asking for more hours, for it to be open later. So we've been kind of tweaking, trying to figure out we had set hours, but as you know, Superior Court and District Court has jury. And so we've gonna tweak some hours so we are open later to hit when the juries are there, because they have a break, I think at 10, and one at lunch and then another in the afternoon. So we weren't hitting those sweet spots quite with the hours that we had determined. So we've been in communication with them, and they have included us on the emails so we know when they'll be to be open at that time.
So it's still a work in progress.
Mhm. Yeah, so for example, when we first started, we only took card only, and then we heard a lot of inquiries about, well, I only have cash, things like that. So we switched up and we are taking cash transactions, and are they about equal to our credit card transactions? So it's
Mhm.
split pretty evenly between credit card and cash. So that was one adjustment we made. And then Thursdays was the other adjustment because of the juries typically being in the afternoon. So, and that has helped business. But we're trying to limit the amount of hours that are we're actually the person that works there is an employee of a temporary agency. So we try to limit those hours total for the week to somewhere around 25, maybe 30.
Next slide, please. So unemployment compensation, we have a budget of 83,000 for goods and services. So far, we've brought in all of that, and those are department billings for unemployment claims for the prior year. So when we prepare the budget, we look at all the unemployment claims that had been paid for those respected departments, and then we charge them for it in the next budget. So as we get ready for 2026, we charge departments for 2025 unemployment claims. Miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 8,000. So far has brought in 3,500 in investment earnings. For services, we have a budget of 120,000, and so far we've spent 18,000. So those are costs associated with paying the unemployment claims. There is a timing difference between the expense and the revenue side. So these are unemployment claims that we're paying for 2025 claims. We don't recoup those costs until 2026. So the revenue is, like a year off from the expense,
So the expense is,
current.
the revenue's not. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this expenditure is for 1 quarter. We're billed by the unemployment services on a quarterly basis. And they fluctuate each quarter based upon the filings. We may amend that, but we may want to amend that budget down because I don't think we're going to have that high of a number.
But that's it.
Thank you. Okay. So we have Public Works. Thanks, Kathy.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. Let's see what exciting we have for you scheduled this week. So first up, we have on the agenda, on the consent agenda, we have 3 consent agenda, four, including, so 3 agreements, contracts, bid awards, and 1 resolution. So the first item is supplemental agreement number 1 to our local agency agreement with PBS for the Delamere Road culvert replacements projects. So all of this is when WashDOT went back and re-reviewed our contract. They found what they felt was an error that needed to be corrected in our DBE calculations. With the dollar amount that was in there, it was 15.97, not the 16%. And so we made a slight change to the contract to change their ante rates, which is WashDOT's approved rates, and did a contract deduct of $753.23 to bring us back to the 16, it's now above 16% for a DBE requirement. So that is the reason behind the supplement, and what is actually changing is a $753 deduction from the prime contractor to give our DBE requirement back above the 16% minimum.
What is DBE?
Disadvantaged Business Enterprises. And on this particular contract, they are using 2. One is for I believe is a woman-owned business that's doing it's Northwest Watersheds, and they are also using STEL. Northwest Watersheds is for hydrologies and hydraulics stream design. STEL is for cultural resources, and then they're also using HWA Geoscience for some geotechnical laboratory work for them. So those are the 3 DBE that they're using on this project as part of their design project. So once this amendment's signed, WashDOT will be happy again, and we can get back moving on this project design. So just this project is a federally funded PROTECT funding, which is why WashDOT is involved. And the next item is the contract execution for All Stripes for the countywide striping project. So we awarded that project on May 27th, and now they have all their proper paperwork in place, and we're ready to go ahead and execute the contract. The next is the contract execution for the South Cloverdale Road, Comfort Road intersection and the South Cloverdale Road Improvements Project. That was also awarded, actually, that was awarded on June 3rd. So we've been working through the documentation and the approvals from WashDOT. So that is also ready to be executed. The next item is item number 10, which is an unusual item. So there's a resolution to release the public water easement on a parcel, and this parcel is actually within the city limits of Woodland. And so for some reason, when the easement was executed during the development, it was issued to the county and not the city. So this is just to correct that error. So the releasing all claims that the county had in that easement, that was something we never had claims to, and make it to go towards the city of Woodland. So it's a cleanup of error that was made on someone else's part. Any question on our consent agenda items?
Not so far.
All right, so we have two motion items. The first is for transportation of rock material through June 30 of 2026 to the headquarters landfill. This is a bid award to JL Stordahl and Sons for $455,140 and 20 cents. Any 2 cents you want to add, Sean?
Sure. This is for the landfill. So we bid out a multiple varieties of rock for our gas wells, our road bases, road tops, things of that nature. It is a delivered product, so that's why it's being awarded to one person only, unlike our roads ones. And we, in 2025, the 24-25 contract, we did exceed, and we came back and asked for the board on that one. That is reflected in this new contract, those higher values. And the expectation is that we will spend that to build the roads.
So we put it out to multiple rock carriers, if you will, and just give it to the lowest one because they're gonna deliver it.
Correct.
Okay.
So the final Public Works item is the bid award for the 2025 countywide delineator project to Construction Ahead Incorporated, doing business as Pavement Surface Controls. They were the lowest of 5 responsive bidders and 1 non-responsive bidder. It's approximately $15,000 below the engineer's estimate and just slightly below the next highest estimate. This is being paid for with Highway Safety Improvement Program grants, and these will be in various locations throughout the county.
Okay. I don't have any questions.
I'm good.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. See you tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, building and planning.
Good morning, Tracy Jackson, Building and Planning. In front of you, you've got on the consent agenda, it's a 2-part agenda item, even though it's only listed as one. It's an interlocal agreement with, first of all, we're getting money from the state for our VSP program, Voluntary Stewardship Program. We partner with the Cowlitz Conservation District, and they run our program for us. We get the money, we pass it through to them. They run our program for us. We used to do it internally. We had a staff member that did it for us. When she gave her notice, we had already partnered with them for certain projects of this, but when she gave her notice, it was back in 2023. We went full board and just partnered everything with them. They do an amazing job. That's what, I mean, they're known in the community for. And so our contract is with the state, first of all, and then the state, then we contract then with Cowlitz Conservation District and just do pass through. So that's what this agenda item is tomorrow. It's the interlocal agreement with the Cowlitz Conservation District for the joint coordination and support services for the VSP program. They've done a lot of projects around our community. The notable ones were the Kalama River Road or Camp Kalama, the bank stabilization project. They've done one up on in the headquarters area and then also on the Cowweeman. So and they work with homeowners. They're fantastic. Their office is over there by Wendy's, in that little complex. So that's
So it's not a new one, we're just renewing it.
nothing new, just a renewal. The contract's up, starts tomorrow with the state for the next 2 years. So it's July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2027. So we're looking forward to just continuing the partnership and the work in the community. That's
Sounds
it.
good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Risk?
Scott Kaleen with Risk.
Shelley Pierce, Risk.
We just have one consent agenda item for tomorrow, and it's just the completion letter for the annex project for the flooding. It's just to close out the project.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
we're done and ready, everything's,
Yeah, we've done, all final billing has come in. We're working with the vendor to make sure that they billed appropriately for all of the claims. And then we also have worked with Risk to make sure that our agent, insurance agent that we went through for them to divide and conquer the billing because there were two separate floods. So they're separating and segregating the appropriate person to put the claim towards
so
for
we're getting-
both parties.
We're getting closer to filing it and getting paid.
Reimbursement, yes.
That's correct. After this letter is signed, we'll send to the insurance agent to process.
Cool, good.
Have you had a chance to go over there and check it out? Did you see
Did.
before or after?
I didn't see before, but I did
Okay.
go after, yeah.
Yeah, it looks really
They
nice.
Gave me a tour,
Yeah,
yeah,
really
looks good.
nice. Glad to be done with it.
yeah, good.
Great.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have the sheriff? Is he online? Okay. Sheriff, whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Yeah, what you have is just, I guess, formalizing the discussion we had here a couple months ago concerning entering into an agreement with the cities to put out a request for proposal for both animal control and animal sheltering. Longview's taking the lead on this and just in the process of getting all the entities to sign on board and then work towards issuing a RFP on that. There'll be two distinct, I guess, sections of that. One would be the animal sheltering portion and the other would be the animal control part of it as well. Just seeing what is out there for entities interested in putting in a bid or proposal to do those services.
Okay, so are we putting that out or did you say Longview is?
Longview's taken the lead on that, and we'd had at least 2 or 3 meetings here. It's been a few months ago about just preliminary discussions about moving forward on something. That's kind of what's come to light or fruition of those meetings is to have this local group put something out jointly and see what's out there.
Okay, and what municipalities are on board with that, Brad, do you know? Obviously you do, but which ones have said, yeah, they want in?
Well, I know everybody's participated except Kalama. Kalama's really never, as if they've always done their own thing with animal control. But the other 4 cities and the county have been involved in these discussions and they're all in the process of signing on to this ILA right now. I can't tell you if, as far as I know, I think everybody's going to do it. Hadn't heard any opposition to that. So it should be the county and 4 cities with the exception of Kalama.
Awesome, okay, good. I don't have any questions.
So Kalama's on this agenda. Are we gonna scratch them off? They're not agreeing to that?
Well, we'll wait and see if I know it was sent to them. I'm just, based on past history, they've never had contracts with the Humane Society or they've always done their own thing. So there could be a change of heart on their part.
Okay,
At this point, we're just getting, all the entities are getting signed on board and whoever agrees to sign on, they'll go forward then with a RFP.
okay, thank you.
Thanks for heading that up too, Brad. I think it's gonna be better for all parties involved once we get this squared away and moving forward.
Yep. All right.
Very much.
Okay,
Well, thank you.
thank you. Okay, hey, Marin.
Good morning, Marin Fox, Director of Corrections. On the consent agenda tomorrow, we have an agreement between Cowlitz and Skamania County It's a reciprocal agreement to house inmates in case of emergency. So if we have an evacuation or if they have an evacuation, that we would house inmates for them to the best of our ability.
Are we renewing an agreement or is this new?
This is a new agreement. We're going through the process of looking at our emergency processes and evacuation process. So we'll likely be bringing other agreements from other counties forward, but this is the first one. Okay,
Good. Okay. Thanks.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is Ryan on? No? Okay, I don't know that we have any miscellaneous. I don't have anything to bring forth. We don't have any executive sessions. Is HR ready? No?
I'm not sure about HR, but at 11, we have the Superior Court and District Courts coming and talking about the Hall of Justice and
Okay.
the move. So I think if we could recess until then.
Okay, good with that. Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and recess till then. My apologies for jumping the gun on that this morning.
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I just have one item as a follow-up from the last meeting I had. A request from Public Works to start a new senior engineer at step 5, which is 9739. The engineer has accepted that offer. Just approval to start him at step 5.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. That's all I have. Thanks.
Good morning, Savannah Clement, Public Services. So I'm here as kind of, it's not a, I don't know if it's a formal request, but it could be a head nod. We're asking that the board allow both Superior Court and District Court the ability to use the Commissioner's hearing room, so this room, as well as the general meeting room, which is right across the hall, for Friday court services. And this will likely be through mid-August, starting mid-August, through mid-April into May potentially. Normally, we wouldn't come to the board with like a request like this, but because it's for such a long period of time, it has, it directly impacts the courts, both of them. We thought it would be appropriate to come and kind of make that request at a public meeting, so that's on record for those people who could be maybe from the public wanting to access these rooms and they're not able to, just to provide some communication and awareness on that front. So that is the request today, for permission to use these locations for court.
Yes, just Fridays.
Yes, currently just Fridays, with the exception of, we want to do a placeholder. So you're aware of the power outage that we'll be having Labor Day weekend. We're creating Plan Bs and Cs in the event that, say, LNI does not approve our permit and we cannot turn power on Tuesday after Labor Day. We would have a backup location here. Sounds like, and Molly or Danielle can come up if they like, but it sounds like District Court's okay with not having a docket that day, but they're still required to do certain court functions within 24 hours, and it's a long weekend. So I'll let Molly speak to that.
Right, we would still need to do our jail dockets, and anyone that received a charge over the weekend that was required to be seen in person the next judicial day. So it would be a small amount of cases, but they are necessary for us to hear.
Okay.
Correct, and I don't have the date in front of me, but it's the Tuesday after Labor Day.
It's September 2nd.
So with District Court, they'll be in GMR. So that shouldn't be a huge impact other than people would have to go through security, who probably aren't used to going through security for a Tuesday meeting. Of course, it would be unrelated to the Tuesday meeting, but it would likely be a requirement for people entering the building. And then for Superior Court, I'm not sure about, I'll let Danielle speak to that, but they would be utilizing this room. So I'll kind of let her elaborate.
We have our protection order docket that has to be heard a Tuesday after a Monday holiday. So we have the ability to cut that down to one docket, so we could potentially just use the afternoon if this room is clear over here. If not, Molly and I kind of talked about a way to maybe share the GMR if possible.
Given the circumstances, I'm not doing whatever.
Okay.
I mean, we already have an imposition on you, due to the circumstances, but whatever we do to accommodate. I'm in favor of whatever we need to do to accommodate your circumstances.
I've got no issues with it. I do have a question. Where are you going to put security since there's 3 doors to get into this building?
So we did meet with the security group after our stakeholder meeting last week. And we're still working that out. There is a tentative plan to do it actually on this floor using some entrances for district court. We're kind of routing the public in a different way than what they would be used to. So we have some plans in place. I'll be meeting hopefully with that group next week, not this week, but next week, moving forward on the official plans. We can share that with the board and the public once we get a plan in place.
Go for it.
Yeah. And does security mean the same security that you get into that we have to go through when we get into the Hall of Justice?
Pretty close,
Thank
yeah, if not the same.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're looking at baggage scanners that can be rented, and I think there's a metal
Metal
detector that is maybe over at juvenile that could be used.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, is Brad going to be providing security or is the security?
So the sheriff's office is providing their court security, I believe, similar to what they're doing at the hall, and they kind of are in charge of, security. So they're also heading this committee on how we're going to set it up here. But yes, they are involved and they'll be here. Then we'll also have another secondary security guard with our current vendor. We'll have to amend that contract or add to it to get that.
Okay. Sheriff, do you have anything that you want to add if you're on?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know he's on.
Troy?
Try right.
It's Troy Brightbill from the Sheriff's Office. I don't have anything to add. Brad's at another engagement right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We'll continue to come probably weekly. I mean, at our 1:30 workshops with some updates. I did want to add that the board should be expecting a proposal presentation from Millig, the actual proposal. We were going to do it this Wednesday, but we wanted all 3 board members, so it'll be pushed to the following Wednesday. But nothing vastly different from what you guys have heard from Millig the first 2 sessions. So there shouldn't be anything too surprising in there, but we'll have them available to answer questions as well.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any miscellaneous? Any other comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn. See you guys tomorrow.